We get started. I just needed to let you know I have a hard stop at 10:45. We have a special council meeting at 11 in
Okay.
Meaford.
Thank you, Shirley.
Just before you call the meeting to order, Chair Smith, we don't appear to have quorum quite yet, but hopefully we have a couple more people joining in the next few minutes.
So you just need 2 more, Tara, or how many do you need?
I know that Simon was going to be here.
Tara, Blair Freeman had submitted some questions. Have they been forwarded to the staff?
Yes, I forwarded them to Scott Taylor, and so they will be either addressed at the end of the presentation or incorporated into. And I've let Blair know as well and encouraged him to watch the recording to get the responses.
Thank you.
No, enter.
We've got Rob now, Tara.
Excellent.
You can let me know what
Oh,
verdict is.
Brenda's there too, so we have quorum now.
Wonderful. Shall we start?
Communications could confirm they're ready, then.
We're good to go. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Welcome this morning to our Agricultural Advisory Committee meeting for December 5th, 2024. Thank you for joining us. It's a very busy time for farmers because they're all trying to blow snow, etc. So thank you for taking the time to get here today. Call this meeting to order at, my clock says, 9 a.m. sharp. Are there any declarations of interest this morning? Seeing none. If any should arrive during the course of the meeting, please let us know, declare them at that time. We have one delegation today, Jennifer Ross, Local Food and Farm, to speak on Cooperatives 101. Jennifer, are you ready to present your presentation?
I am. If I'm able to share my screen, I'm happy to jump in if we're all ready.
Thanks so much.
All right, so thank you very much for having me. As indicated, my name is Jennifer Ross. I am the Executive Director of the Ontario Cooperative Association. I was also supporting the Local Food and Farm Cooperative as well through their kind of ending of their last round of funding and their projects and things like that. And either fortunately or unfortunately, the Local Food and Farm Cooperative as a separate entity has chosen to wind down. However, the purpose of that is not to stop supporting local food and farm co-ops. It's really because of the structure of how they were originally developed around specific funding that is no longer is easily accessible, and they were struggling a little bit with the administration. So our organization has kind of taken under our wing, and will continue to offer and look for grants and funding opportunities to do food and farm specific programming, and also support the local food and farm cooperatives. We were already doing much of that work behind the scenes anyway, so there won't be much of a disruption in the services provided. A lot of their resources and things that are specific to local food and farm also will still be available. So while the name of the organization, you might be contacting someone different, we're still here to support those types of businesses as well. So with that being said, I will just mention that while I'm doing my presentation, you're welcome to ask any questions that you want. I'm not sure if there's a moderator here that can help me, because as I have my screen and my notes open, I might not see if someone raises a hand. So if you're able to unmute and just jump in, please do. Or if a moderator can step in, if I don't see a chat question or something like that, please feel free. So today I'm going to give an introduction to the cooperative sector, how it's used, the different types of ways that it's used. If you, again, have specific questions about its use in agriculture or anything like that, please feel free to jump in, because I'm happy to kind of move this conversation or this presentation to be more specific to the questions or concerns that you might have. So, I'm going to go back one. So I'm not sure if everybody can raise a hand, but by a show of hands, are we familiar with cooperatives here in the room? I see a few electronic, a few hands raised. I'm sure if you're involved in agriculture here in Ontario, you've heard of some of the bigger agricultural co-ops, and they're also used in smaller food and farm sector as well. However, there are a lot of myths and misconceptions about the cooperative model and what they can be or what they are. And certainly there's an awareness or lack of awareness or understanding about cooperatives here in Ontario. Not so much in Quebec or even out in Western provinces where there's larger co-ops that encompass more things like grocery stores where people see them every day. Here in Ontario, our co-ops operate usually a little bit behind the scenes, so people aren't quite as aware. This mostly comes from kind of a perpetuated lack of understanding. So teachers don't learn about co-ops, so therefore they don't teach about co-ops in schools and things like that. And part of our organization and the other cooperative associations, their role is to do that education and advocacy and awareness work. So cooperation or cooperatives come in many forms. Financial cooperatives, we would call them credit unions, operate in 1,693 locations, representing 5.9 million members and providing 28,000 jobs across Canada. Smaller co-ops are problem solvers in their communities, keeping valuable products and services and jobs local and accessible. There are obviously internationally recognized companies like Ocean Spray or Sunkist, the Associated Press, and even the Green Bay Packers that are very large and profitable companies controlled democratically. And then also we can't forget informal cooperatives like the Rotating Savings and Credit Associations or ROSCAs. These microfinance groups are often overlooked when talking about the global cooperative identity, but have been documented around the world doing amazing informal cooperation. So what exactly is a cooperative? Cooperatives are people-centered enterprises owned, controlled, and run by and for their members to realize their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations. That's the official definition. And here are some examples of how someone might define a cooperative. So individually, somebody might say that cooperatives are a business model that enable groups of people to share ownership of a business in a more democratic way. Big or small, everyone in a co-op has a say in how it's operated. Or co-ops are a way for skilled professionals to work together to build capacity, leverage resources, and collaborate through shared ownership. To give a little more context, there are over 1,180 cooperatives here in Ontario, contributing $7.9 billion to the economy with 1.4 million members and almost 20,000 full-time jobs. However, 99% of co-ops with employees here in Ontario are small enterprises, usually missing the spotlight, like I mentioned before, as they quietly serve their members and their communities. I was actually yesterday looking for an example of a marketing type co-op. And while I found a few, they didn't have websites and they didn't have a lot of information publicly because they don't need to, because their members know who they are. They operate, in a bit of a circular economy where their members use their services and they serve their members. So there's not a lot of need for external communications, which sometimes leads to the issue of people not knowing about co-ops. So additionally, 72% of co-ops in Ontario are considered nonprofit. So I'll get a little bit more into the structure and what that means, but it doesn't mean that they aren't necessarily making money, just like other nonprofits. It's just that the profits are either shared equitably amongst their members, or they are used to build the organization and improve the services. In Canada, there's over 7,400 co-ops with 195,000 employees. 21 million Canadians are members of a co-op. Yet we're still not well known or understood as a sector by the general public. But like I mentioned before, once you're aware, it's hard not to wonder why there aren't more co-ops used in all different sectors across the country and even across the world. So cooperatives are also a global force, a thriving business model that spans all sectors worldwide with a total economic impact of $2,146 billion US. So here are some cooperatives you may recognize. There's Gay Lee, Meridian Credit Union, Urbane Cyclists, which is a bike store in Toronto, Cooperators, and Ocean Spray, like I mentioned. Those are some big recognizable brands. And in Ontario, we have a pretty diverse sector operating in everything from housing, IT, healthcare, which is really an emerging sector directly related to the demand created after COVID-19 for safe home healthcare, so PSW work and things like that. Financial services like credit unions, renewable energy, insurance. There's also a small co-op that operates out of the Toronto Zoo that generates biogas, which is kind of an interesting and innovative idea. And then there's co-ops in the recording industry, construction, food, and agriculture, everything in between as well. So cooperatives are a versatile and resilient model that keeps money and resources circulating within the communities that they serve. A community can mean really anything. It's defined by the co-op's membership. So it could be a location, a demographic, a sector, really anything. But the important part is that whatever service or product they are providing, it's owned and controlled by those who use it. That's the core differentiator. Co-ops are a model that can be applied to any organizational size, or structure. Co-ops exist to address a specific need in a community. The co-op may provide employment, like in a worker co-op, services or products, build capacity, share resources, or address social and economic needs within a community. Revenue is a means to meet the needs of the membership and not necessarily the primary focus. Co-ops aren't the best option for everyone. They take time and dedication to the principles and purposes to set them up. And there can be barriers for potential investment because stakeholders or lenders are not as understanding of the model. However, that's why usually that investment and that commitment to it comes from within the membership. Co-ops work for groups of people who want to work together to start a business, solve a problem, fill a need within their community. And again, that community can mean anything. And they work especially well for niche products or services, or where the needs are not currently being met by the government or private sector or something like that, like I mentioned in healthcare. They also have a higher level of success than other types of businesses, and that's for a couple of reasons. So they are more service focused because they are owned and governed by the people that are actually using the services or the people that work there. Decisions are made based on what's best for the business and the members, and not just what brings in more profit or what will grow them the fastest. Co-ops can take longer to start up, and there's more of an involved process where you involve more of your stakeholders in the development process, which ultimately leads to a stronger business plan and setting the business up for success. So while there aren't as many co-ops as other types of businesses, they do usually outlast them over a 5 or 10 year period. So now I'm going to go into a little bit of the structure and the way that co-ops are used and developed. So along with sole proprietorships or partnerships, there are 3 types of corporations in Ontario: a business corporation, a not-for-profit corporation, and a cooperative corporation. I'm not sure how clear this is on the screen, but here's a diagram of how a co-op might be structured. There's always 2 sides of a cooperative. There's the democratic function, who controls the organization, such as the members and the board. And then there's the business function, which is how it serves those members or customers by creating that product or service. The members elect the board of directors from within themselves to govern the organization, and the board hires staff and managers to manage the day-to-day business. And then again, those members are actually the customers that are using it. So it's a bit of a circle, or I made it a square here, but around up to the governance model as well. So co-ops differ from other business corporations and nonprofits in a few key ways. They are organized by the people they serve to meet their common needs or provide services. They are owned and controlled democratically with one member, one vote. And the profits belong to the members to be used to improve the services or to be shared equitably as patronage returns. I would say probably the biggest difference between a co-op and a business corporation, which people are more familiar with, is that even if you have shareholders, those shareholders do not receive more votes based on how many shares they own. They still only have one member, one vote, but their patronage return might be higher based on how much services they transact with the cooperative in an equitable way. So co-ops are also a unique structure because they can either be for-profit or not-for-profit. So when we were comparing the previous types of corporations, a business corporation is always going to be for-profit, a not-for-profit corporation will always be non-profit. Whereas the cooperative model, you can choose to be either. You can be a share capital cooperative or a for-profit cooperative, or you can be a non-share capital cooperative, which is typically then organized as a nonprofit cooperative. So there's a few different types of co-ops, but they are really just defining who your members are. So oftentimes you'll hear things like a producer co-op or a consumer co-op. And while those define who the members are of that cooperative, how it's structured or what type of business it does really doesn't change the way that it's governed necessarily, or the way that the Cooperative Corporations Act would apply to it. The only types of different co-ops would be a nonprofit housing cooperative or a worker cooperative. Those two have some different regulations under the government legislation that apply to them, but all other types of co-ops operate very similarly. So consumer co-ops are the most common because consumers or customers can be defined as anyone who uses that co-op. And the product or service they are using can really be anything. Consumers are the customers who are the members. Think of a co-op grocery store or housing or even your local credit union. The members are the ones consuming the product or service. This is the category that most co-ops fall into. Like I said, because you're really just defining who those members are. A general cooperative would probably be considered a consumer co-op. And then I have some examples up there. Karma Food Co-op in Toronto, the Queer the Land, which is a housing co-op, and also Libro Credit Union. So worker co-ops are created to generate employment for the members, so specifically to create employment. And this is the one that has some different legislation around it about how many members you need to employ full-time. They can be something like a coffee shop, or home care workers as an example, consultants, really any type of employment. They're typically small, between 3 and 20 worker members, but there's actually a cooperative in Spain called Mondragon, which has over 80,000 worker members across 257 businesses. So it's definitely a structure that can scale. So producer co-ops are definitely the most common when it comes to agriculture, food, and farming. The members are the producers of the product of the co-op that then sells. So Gay Lea Foods, for example, has 1,300 dairy farmers who supply milk, which the co-op then makes into products like sour cream or that spray whipped cream. And the farmers of Gay Lea share in the profits that the sales of the products that they've made are generating. So there's actually 2 ways that the members are benefiting from being a member of that cooperative. And this again can work on very small scale farmer producers as well, or packaging and product marketing and things like that. And then there's kind of one more type of cooperative, the multi-stakeholder co-op, that are less common in Ontario, but more widely used in Quebec, where they are called solidarity co-ops in Quebec. So you would typically choose a multi-stakeholder model if the different membership classes have different or competing interests, but still a common goal. StockC is a cooperative similar to Getty Images, where you can get stock photos. It's owned by different membership classes. They have an executive, a staff, and an artist class, where all members have 2 seats on the board and equal voting power, that ensure that StockC is looking after its interests of all of its stakeholders. Another example would be a cooperative grocery store, where you would have the producers or the people producing the food who want obviously the highest price for that food that they're selling to the store. You would have consumers who would obviously want the lowest price for that food that they're buying at the store. And then you would have workers who would want the highest wage for their time working at the store. So while those 3 stakeholder groups might all want a local accessible food store within their community, so that's their common goal, they have to all work together to make a cooperatively owned and equitable business work by all working with each other to help get to the needs that they're looking for. So moving on to kind of some of the structure considerations, these are things that people need to think about if they're starting a co-op or if they're joining a co-op. These are the things that differentiate them. So ownership and control are top of mind when deciding if a cooperative is the right structure for a new business or endeavor. And there's some ways to define those things here. Governance is the foundation of a cooperative, so it's important to understand that what it truly means, I should say. We're all familiar with democracy practiced at a large scale in our provincial and federal governments. However, participating democratically and good governance on a small scale can and should be fulfilling for those people involved, rewarding and sometimes challenging, because we're not all used to the day-to-day governance practices necessarily in our day-to-day lives. So in a cooperative, all members of the co-op, like I mentioned, have 1 vote on important decisions for the co-op. We call that 1 member, 1 vote. Directors are elected from within the membership and must be active members of the cooperative. Members approve and pass the bylaws. So those are those internal governing documents that map out how the co-op will run, including the roles and responsibilities of the members and the board, the election process, etc. They can also present and pass resolutions, which are just decisions that want to be made by the co-op or they want the co-op to make on their behalf. And co-op must hold an annual general meeting for all members every 15 months. And that just keeps members close to the business and making sure that it's being run as they see fit. And then governance specific. So these are some rules for the board of directors. So the board of directors decide on the direction and strategy, ensuring that the co-op operates according to the principles and its values and bylaws. A working board, which often is what happens in smaller co-ops, might also do some of the operational work, keeping the doors open and doing some of that day-to-day operations. The board is responsible for hiring and overseeing management and staff if they grow to a level where they need, or a size, I should say, that they need to do that. And then the board is responsible for setting policies. They will also recommend, bylaw changes and amendments and things like that that need to be changed, but those need to be approved by the membership as a whole. So cooperatives are the only business model with a built-in set of values. All co-ops voluntarily follow the principles that are based on equity, solidarity, democracy, and community-mindedness. There's a set of principles that every co-op in the world follows, and it helps to set up the structure and framework that define what makes a cooperative. So not every co-op is going to follow all of these the same way. Some co-ops may not follow them at all. However, the cooperative business model was created around the need for these types of values in business, because at the time, there was a lot of, corrupt decision making and things like that, just to increase profits, and really, it was really affecting the individual communities. Thinking about flour being sold and being cut with chalk and things like that. Like, that's the types of practices that were happening that actually led to the cooperative business model being developed. So those 7 principles, which have changed over the years, but these are the ones that are internationally recognized: voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, member economic participation, autonomy and independence, education, training, and information sharing, cooperation amongst co-ops, and concern for community. So together with the governance and principles, a cooperative's purpose is most important because co-ops are owned and controlled by their members. They do not exist solely to maximize the return on investment for external shareholders. Instead, for-profit co-ops often pay patronage or dividends to members based on how much they use the co-op, not necessarily how many shares they own. And co-ops strive to operate in a way that maximizes the benefit to their member owners, whether that's through profit sharing or improvement of services. So now I'm going to get into some of the questions that were asked of me around the benefits of cooperatives, some of the challenges and all of those types of things. So ownership and control, like I said, are top of mind. And let's go over some of the economic benefits here. So there's definitely use of increased bargaining power. So by pooling resources, cooperatives can negotiate better prices for both buying supplies and selling products. Again, this is often used in kind of that producer co-op model in agriculture specifically, where a lot of farmers will get together and pool their grain, for instance, and then sell it into the market, or they might buy fertilizer together at a cheaper price because they're buying in bulk, because it's like a buying group, a large subset of people who are all buying the same product. Shared costs, members share the cost of equipment, facilities, marketing, reducing those individual expenses. Cooperatives can help members access markets that might be challenging to reach individually and ensuring better distribution of sales. An example of that might be a small dairy co-op that started where they start a cooperative to collect the milk from the different farmers, so then they can sell it in a large lot to one buyer instead of all individually only having a few liters of milk to sell. And then financial stability. The collective nature of a cooperative often provides a more stable financial environment, as risk and rewards are also shared amongst the members or across the membership. So some of the social benefits: cooperatives operate on democratic principles, giving each member a voice and a vote on decision-making processes, which fosters a sense of ownership and empowerment. Cooperatives often provide ongoing education and training to its members to enhance their skills and knowledge that benefit both individual and the group. So this might be training and knowledge sharing around how to be a good board member, or how to become, someone on the board of the organization. Or it might be practices around their farming practices, how to best plant or seed or whatever it is. Making sure that you're raising everybody's knowledge around your specific topic is really something that co-ops like to do. And then members of cooperatives support each other, creating a network of mutual assistance and solidarity, which can really create that sense of community and encourage that continued support of and patronization of that cooperative that they started in the first place. And then community benefits. So cooperatives also often invest back into the local community, supporting local businesses and also creating jobs. Credit unions are a great example of this. You're obviously banking with your credit union. However, they also have very strong community service, donations and things like that back to their communities. Cooperatives typically prioritize sustainable practices that benefit the environment and their community as a whole. And sustainability can mean everything from environmental sustainability to economic sustainability. By bringing people together with common goals, cooperatives build social capital, strengthen communities, ties, and promote cooperation as a whole. And then cooperatives can also play a role in preserving local traditions and cultures by supporting local artisans, farmers, other producers, even religious groups and cultural groups as well. And then just to touch a little bit more on the sustainability side. So financial stability or sustainability, members are built-in customers and financial contributors. So The nice thing about a co-op is that usually you've done your feasibility ahead of time and you know who your members are, you know who your customers are, and you know that there's a need that you're serving before you even start the business. And profitability is not the only goal. The long-term success of serving those member needs, keeping the jobs local, those types of things are top of mind. The social sustainability, engaging in those local communities through involvement, member education and support, and then ethical treatment and fair compensation of workers. And then environmental as well. So we often use the term triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit to define how a cooperative might approach some of their environmental sustainability goals. So unfortunately, just like any business, there are some challenges as well when it comes to cooperatives. So cooperatives typically rely on member contributions and have trouble attracting outside investors easily, which can limit their capital base. This isn't always the case. There's definitely some cooperatives around community development, housing, even in technology and new emerging markets that obviously can attract outside investors. The cooperative model is not as well known or understood by the government. So we don't get as much spotlight or support. Our organization and organizations like the Food and Farm Cooperative, we're definitely working to do this and to raise awareness and also to advocate within the governments to make sure that when things change or regulatory changes need to be made, that we're raising the concerns of the cooperative sector as a whole so we don't get left behind as a business model. Member engagement, ensuring member participation can be challenging. This usually fluctuates over a long-term period where your members might grow or change, their needs change, and the cooperative hasn't adapted to what the needs are, and therefore the members don't see value anymore. So just like any business, you need to make sure that you're creating value for your members and your customers to be able to engage them long-term. Cooperatives also face stiff market competition from larger, more established businesses that may have more resources and market influence. There's obviously very large co-ops that do not have this problem at all, but just like any small business trying to break into a market, a cooperative can be challenging, not necessarily because of its business model, but usually because of its size and scale at the beginning. And then management and governance. So effective governance relies on skilled leadership, which can be challenging to cultivate within a democratic framework, because remember, those leaders at a board level are coming from within your membership. So that's where the education and training is really important. Our organization does a lot of governance training to make sure that boards of directors know their roles, understand, can govern well. And then also, just finding leaders that are experts, sector experts to actually lead the organization from a general manager role can also be challenging. Again, not specific to cooperatives or the cooperative model. I think there's a lot of organizations right now that are finding it hard to find skilled leaders in certain sectors. So I'm going to stop here for questions. I do have some resources and some other information that I'm going to speak about, but is there anything specific that you would like to ask about something that's going on in your region, agricultural co-ops or food and farming co-ops specifically? Please feel free to jump in if you have any questions.
Thanks so much for the excellent presentation, Jennifer. Yes, as Jennifer said, if you have any questions, please raise your hand or just unmute and pose them now, please. I'm not seeing. Oops.
Sorry to come in late there. And thank you very kindly for sending the link. I always get a little bit of a panic when things go wrong. So I'm sorry to tell you, but I also have to leave shortly. So anyhow, thank you very kindly for this presentation. And I think the co-ops have served agriculture, and of course we're closely related in agriculture, have served us very, very well. The one thing that I have learned, though, is that competition is incredibly steep. The time that EastGen bought MGI and Kitchener, I really thought that this was going to be another Gailey venture type of thing, and that, yeah, we couldn't stand the test of time, and that is it's very unfortunate. But my and it's just a comment, but my bottom line always is, if you want to do well in this economic environment, stay off the radar screen from the multinationals, because they.
Yeah.
Anyhow, thank you very much for this presentation.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Simon.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comment?
Yeah, Lori, it's Paul McQueen here. I would make a couple comments. Thanks for the presentation. The apple growers in Thornbury, do they not have a bit of a cooperative?
There's definitely a fruit tree farm that does, not farm, co-op that does apples. I can't remember if that's the one that's in Thornbury.
Yeah, I'm
It
trying to
probably is.
think of the name, but yeah, I think it's because they went together and built that big storage or cold storage or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. So they would be what we consider a producer co-op, where they, all different apple farmers collectively, they maybe collect and grade their apples, and then they're able to store them and to sell them back into the market. Easier, as in it's logistically easier for them to sell in bulk when they've been able to collect all of the apples from their members.
Right, they probably have bigger volumes, and they can end up having a cold storage together. Then they can sort of determine when they want to sell, because they can help hold back collectively.
Exactly.
And the other comment I have is, if there was a business and the business was struggling, sometimes I remember in the past where sometimes the employees or shareholders take over the business. I don't know if that's
Yes.
like cooperative, but it's almost like they want the businesses to be successful. They become shareholders to keep it going.
Yeah. So there's some interesting things happening in that realm right now. So worker cooperatives have always been an option, or converting to a cooperative of any type has always been an option. An example we like to use is the Erin Theatre, which is in Campbellford, where it was a local theater owned by an individual sole proprietor, and the community came together and turned it into a cooperative. So now they collectively own this theater that's thriving, and it's amazing. And worker co-op, there's been transitions to worker co-ops as well, where a sole proprietor owns a coffee shop and the workers collectively decide that they would like to own it. So conversions to co-ops, especially as small businesses are closing, sole proprietors, with whether it's retiring business owners or a changing in demographics and things like that. It's definitely an option and something that we encourage and work with people on. Now, the interesting piece to this that's come about recently is that there was a big push from private businesses around, I think what they call, there's a term for it, now I can't remember what it is. Employee shared ownership, ESOP, I think is the term for it, where they actually lobbied to have some tax incentives. So when you're purchasing a business, there's going to be a cost to what that business is valued at. And before, literally like just a few months ago, there was no kind of tax incentive for employees to either become shareholders or become members of the co-op. However, they were successful in lobbying that. The Worker Co-op Federation was also involved in that. So now there's some tax incentives for employees to either become ESOP, like employee share owners, or to convert it into a worker co-op as well. So that's kind of a promising perk that hopefully will allow more small, medium-sized businesses to be purchased by their members, their employees.
Just the other comment I'll make that comes to mind is about 15 plus years ago, there was a cooperative of farmers down by Elmer. Well, that's and they opened up an ethanol fuel plant.
Yeah.
And they were able to use all the corn and not all the farmers that were farmers were part of that co-op. Other investor farmers were cooperative, were part of the cooperative, and it seemed I think that became very successful.
It is IGPC, Integrated
Yes.
Grain Processing Cooperative, I think is their name. They are very successful, very large co-op that still operates. And really many of the farmers that farm grain are using them as their processor because of that very reason. It's hard. I literally just had a meeting yesterday with a group that want to see themselves successful in doing this. They're farmers, and they see the Gaylees, they see the IGPCs and go, how can we ever get there? But IGPC and Gaylee started small too. You have to, you know, be willing and understand that there's potentially a market and put in that time to make it grow. But oftentimes, like I mentioned, the statistics show that cooperatives do succeed over time. Obviously, some of them fail, things happen, markets change, all of that type of stuff. That's an unfortunate side of doing any type of business. But we obviously are big supporters of the sector and hope that more businesses choose that model. But we're really trying to encourage, especially when it's needed in a community, to either keep a job, keep a resource, or to support an industry that is struggling for whatever reason. If there's a way to collectively work together to support themselves, then that might be a good route for them to try.
The biggest thing that my last comment is, unfortunately, farmers seem to buy retail and sell at wholesale. So if you're able to collectively work together to get a better price and you know, ensure that better than wholesale price, because that just seems to be the nature of the beast, in the sense that the wholesale price is always, it should be the other way around a little bit, but it's always not. But that, I think with the a cooperative system or something that's collectively can, you know, help you get that better price as a farmer or any business owner in itself, right? So
Yep. I mean, creating a commodity of scale that allows you to bargain for a better price is usually what it all comes down to at the end of the day. But making sure you have enough customers to then buy the scale that the co-op is now purchasing on behalf of the members is also, it's a bit of a balancing act.
takes time.
Yeah, thanks so much for your comments, Paul. In light of the time, Jennifer, if you quickly want to go to your resource pages and finish up, that would be lovely. And
Sure.
Your presentation has been excellent. Thank you.
Sure. So I just wanted to highlight a few of the things. So our organization, like I mentioned, is broad. We support all different sectors. We do have sector experts within our membership, within our board, and also within our network of people. So if there's ever a co-op in your region, or if anyone's interested in something specific that you would like to pursue or ask more questions about, please feel free to reach out. We often do workshops and lessons and different things. Our onboard program is a great introduction to the cooperative model. So again, if there's someone in your community that wants to learn more about a co-op, or what if the co-op might be right for them if they're trying to start one, that's a great program that we online lesson that we offer a few times a year that kind of gives people a good introduction. And then also we have some digital resources that also help with a variety of things, everything from understanding our act to how to start a co-op, those types of things. So all of that can be found on our website. There's lots of resources there, and we usually provide or do provide consultations and answer questions and things like that from the community at large, because our members pay for me and our team to be here to do these types of sessions, to answer questions, to educate and things like that. So anytime, feel free to reach out to our organization. And here, I think the slide deck was provided, so you can click on some of these links, but these are just some other resources that are also available out there if you're wanting to learn more about cooperatives. And then this is just a bit about our organization and why we exist and why we're here. So I really appreciate any time that I get to come out and speak to people and educate and raise awareness about the sector. And like I said, if anything else comes up, any questions from your other constituents and people within your region, or if you want to learn more, please feel free to reach out anytime.
Thanks so very much, Jennifer. That was wonderful.
Okay, great.
We will proceed. Just something to be aware of. At 10:45, we are going to lose quorum. We're projected to. And so for the rest of the lovely agenda items that we want to cover in depth, we might need to be a little brief to ensure that we're done by 10:45. So keep that in mind. There are several items for direction or discussion. The first one is ecological replacement and enhancement consultation update from Natalie and Michael. Are you both ready to take that one on?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. I'll
Thank
just
you.
share my screen here. Perfect. Okay, so some of you might remember us coming back with the ecological offsetting report a few months ago, just to briefly discuss with the Agricultural Advisory Committee. This is more of a update to that report. We said we were going to come back after we've done some more research and some consultation with other organizations. So we've done that, and we're back now. I'm Michael Cook, by the way. I'm the planning ecologist at Grey County, and I'm joined here with Natalie, also a planning ecologist at Grey County. So we'll just jump into it here. So yeah, a little bit of background, just to follow up from the previous meeting that we kind of went over. Some of you might be saying, what is this ecological replacement enhancement policy? We've decided to maybe go with a bit of a name change from offsetting, as some were getting concerned, thinking that we may just, be implementing a pay to slay policy, as some have mentioned. But really, this policy is supposed to be replacing natural heritage features that are proposed for removal through development, and through that replacement, we're really striving for enhancement of our natural heritage system as a whole. So we thought that change in the name was appropriate, and really that's what we're going for with this policy. So there you go, the ecological replacement enhancement policy. Yeah, and we have done a bit of consultation with other organizations, municipalities that have an existing policy. So we've got a bit of a background of what an existing one may look like, how they use it, and a few other tips as well. We are still seeking feedback from the advisory committee here for any questions or concerns you may have. That's why we're here to answer them. Any specifics that you think would look good in the policy, we would also like to hear that as well. So consultation that we've done, like I said, other counties have some offsetting policies, municipalities, conservation authorities, conservation organizations like Ducks, Ducks Unlimited, and then there's some provincial policy as well around ecological offsetting that they were working on. We've discussed with some provincial policy experts. So we've got a bit of a background of how to maybe develop a policy here. We've also, just through our day-to-day planning role, we talk to developers, regular file progression on subdivisions, condominiums, other types of planning applications, always talking to the developers on what they think would be fair and appropriate approach to offsetting and natural heritage replacement and enhancement. We've had some other meetings with ecologists, so we frequently get environmental studies submitted to us from environmental consultants who have a very good background in some mitigation measures such as offsetting, so getting some tips and tricks from them on what they've seen on previous files that they've worked on. We've presented to the Agricultural Advisory Committee before and the Economic Development Advisory Committee, so you may be familiar with us. We've also done some meetings with Indigenous communities such as Six Nations of the Grand, and looking to reach out to a few more. Again, our local conservation authorities, which we have 4 in the region, the SVCA, NVCA, GSCA, and GRCA. NVCA has an existing policy, so they've been very good, contributors to this ecological offsetting policy in Grey County. And again, we're just requesting some feedback, what you guys think, what you're interested in, any concerns you have, and then, talking more to the builders and developers in Grey County, and then coming to a final consensus on some policy options that we could use for ecological offsetting.
And then in terms of the summary of consultation, we did consult with several interested parties, and then we'll just briefly go over some of the themes that we heard about. So we heard concerns about the redesignation of lands as a result of natural hazard and or heritage features, and some siting considerations as well. For example, offsetting projects should not occur on prime agricultural lands. Any cash in lieu program should have a transparent link to landscape restoration projects. There was a suggestion that there might be some other planning tools that would be better suited to achieve feature protection, and this could be through the identification of natural heritage systems and environmental protection within official plans. There were some questions around whether an offsetting policy would apply where the proposal and or feature is regulated by the Niagara Escarpment Commission or the Conservation Authority, and if these 2 authorities don't permit the removal or creation of a feature, does the policy, does it still apply? We received a lot of feedback in terms of restoration and monitoring requirements, like appropriate replacement ratios, some best practices recommendations, and that the protection should be prioritized and the mitigation hierarchy should be premised on ecological considerations. We also received some recommendations for long-term protection by way of conservation easement, land ownership, or other planning approvals, such as holding provisions. And then, as Michael mentioned, the suggested name change from ecological offsetting to ecological replacement and enhancement to better reflect the intention of the policy. And next slide, please, Michael. So based on the research and feedback we received from the consultation, we pulled together some policy considerations to form a bit of a draft framework for a policy. And so it will be referred to as the Ecological Replacement and Enhancement Policy, as we mentioned. It will only be applicable for certain types of applications under the Planning Act or a county forest management bylaw. So this would be like plan of subdivision or condominium, major zoning bylaw amendments, and major official plan amendments, and then minor exemptions, which is tree clearing under Grey County's forest management bylaw, which would be subject to updating the bylaw. The process would be primarily proponent driven, where the proponent is responsible for securing the lands or working with a third party to secure lands. And this is because the county doesn't have the resources or staff to administer projects beyond its own lands. An environmental impact study must demonstrate the test of no negative impact as per the PPS, and this can consider the replaceability of the feature within a reasonable time frame as per the Natural Heritage Reference Manual. And this study would occur prior to the submission of an offsetting proposal to properly demonstrate the mitigation hierarchy. Significant woodlands, significant wildlife habitat associated with significant woodlands, and wetland features that are not regulated by the applicable conservation authority would be eligible for offsetting. Features that are governed by provincial or federal legislation, such as fish habitat and habitat of threatened and/or endangered species, they are subject to their own permitting processes, so they wouldn't be covered under the policy. Significant woodland preservation, compensation, and monitoring requirements. The intent is that this would be outlined within a tree inventory preservation and removal compensation guideline, which would be a separate document appended to the policy. And then criteria for wetland offsetting, where eligible, would be outlined within the policy, and the county would defer to any conservation authorities that have existing wetland removal and/or wetland offsetting of regulated wetlands within their own regulation. Requirements for consultation with Indigenous communities will be outlined within the policy. Some communities have specific sensitivities regarding certain species and features that aren't listed within the PPS. Projects should not remove prime agricultural lands from production, and some guidance around this will be provided within the policy in terms of land selection and suitability requirements.
Thanks, Natalie. We did get some questions before this presentation, so I'll just address those now. But once I get through these, anyone's definitely welcome to ask anything that's on their mind. So first question, do we immediately consider offsetting when it's proposed? And how do we follow the mitigation hierarchy of avoid, minimize, mitigate, then offset? I'm just going to bring up a little diagram here that I put together. Forgive the crudeness of it, but I did it relatively quickly this morning just to give a visual example of what avoid, minimize, mitigate, and offset may look like. So basically, no, we don't immediately jump into offset. So imagine this property here outlined in red. Developer comes to myself and Natalie, says, hey, we want to clear this whole land. All the trees want to come down. We want to remove all the wetlands. Immediately Natalie and I will say, hey, probably not a good idea. We might go out there doing site inspection and address, what areas are suitable for development, what areas are not. So the first step in this hierarchy is avoid. And basically we'll go out there, we'll do a site inspection. We'll see what are the most ecologically sensitive areas of lands. There may be lands on the property that don't necessarily even need an EIS to develop. These are highlighted in the green areas there. So usually a developed or disturbed area that doesn't have any ecological value necessarily. In this case, it's a cleared field that looks like it's previously been tilled and disturbed frequently. So they could probably develop there and avoid any impacts to natural heritage. And they might not even have to do an environmental impact study in itself. So some people do come to us and they say, hey, perfect. It's relatively easy to build here. We're going to save some money on doing a report. And they might just take up our offer and start developing in those areas that are considered not going to have an impact on natural heritage. But most developers come back with, a subdivision proposal that might need a little bit more room, and then they have to basically expand where they want to build. So at that point, we would be requesting an environmental impact study, and through that study, their ecological consultant might say, hey, yes, you can expand that area. It's still minimized from the original kind of request to clear the entire property, but their consultant has now highlighted these yellow areas that could potentially be built upon with the proper mitigation. So that's the next step, is the mitigation. How can they actually develop these lands appropriately? There might be some tree cutting timelines to avoid species at risk habitat. They might be avoiding species at risk habitat in general through the report, highlighting the most appropriate areas to build. And then offsetting comes in, and this is kind of where I mixed in the purple here, is even through the assessment by the ecological, maybe areas that still need to be removed to incorporate that subdivision that's proposed, right? So this purple area, here's some plantation lands. Depends what the report comes back like, but often we see, hey, these plantation lands have limited ecological value. They're all monocultural crops, cropland, or they're, a certain type of monoculture trees. And we can, potentially consider offsetting this feature. So that's kind of what it looks like, is, the green is generally an okay from the get-go. And then if the developer wants to expand more, we can get them to do a report that will show some other lands that they can use, as well as, the areas that are of most concern that they're proposing for offsetting. This area down here is just a no-touch zone. It could either be a provincially significant wetland or some sort of feature with extremely high ecological value that, we just wouldn't consider for offsetting at all. So that's kind of what it looks like, if that makes a little bit more sense. So yeah, the next question, is this policy significantly different from neighboring counties and jurisdictions? So some counties don't have an offsetting policy at all. Most don't. They're few and far in between, but this ecological offsetting policy would only be for within Grey County's jurisdiction under the Grey County official plan. And generally, if we're offsetting projects, they're going to be within Grey County, specifically within, either the sub-watershed area that the original feature was being removed from, or the same municipality. We're still working on that to see what's most appropriate. Generally, we want to see those ecosystem services that the feature provides that is being removed stay in Grey County, and preferably stay in the same municipality. So that's our take on that so far. Where will offsetting projects take place? Example, tree plantings on lands that are currently in crop production or pastured land, currently zoned rural. Whoops. So this is a little tough one to answer, but generally we would like to see offsetting take place on the lands that they're developing if possible. So if there's a potential for them to replant lands that were taken off the same property on the same property, that is really the best solution. So we're taking a wetland, if they're looking to remove, half a hectare of wetland and they want to reestablish it somewhere else on the property to make room for development, that's really the best case scenario. Other scenarios is they could do, off-site offsetting. So they could either find a property to do offsetting, or they could hire a third party such as Ducks or another conservation organization to find lands or use lands that they already have to do these offsetting requests. Generally, we like to see these offsetting requests take place on and within our existing natural heritage system. So that's a good way to actually prove an enhancement, is if we're taking, you know, trees from that may be within the middle of an agricultural field or something that may not have a lot of ecological importance, and we remove that and add it to our existing natural heritage system. That will increase and enhance, you know, not only the size of our natural heritage system, but also the ecological services they're providing, as well as, you know, the ecological kind of sensitivities, and it could increase that stuff. So that's where we're trying to get with enhancement of our existing natural heritage system. Do offsetting feature requirements cross county lines? For this one, not for Grey County. So anything that's being removed in Grey County is going to stay in Grey County. Like, we would not be offsetting something removed from Grey County into Simcoe County. That's just not something that we would do. Can the use of current informal gravel pit sites as a natural feature offsetting sites be encouraged? For sure, yes. But usually with a proposed gravel pit or quarry or anything, they have an associated rehabilitation plan already along with them. So either through that rehabilitation plan, they're going to be reestablishing that stuff after already, or, you know, if there are some pits that have not been, you know, through the rehabilitation phase, then yeah, that's definitely some of the sites that we would be looking for. Like a degraded old pit that never ended up getting rehabilitated. Perfect example of an area that we would like to see some tree plantings or maybe even wetland creation go in there. Do normal farm practices require offsetting? So this is also a tough one to answer, because we've been struggling to kind of assess what a normal farm practice is. There's a few things in the Nutrient Management Act, but that's something that we would really like feedback from the Agriculture Advisory Committee here is what do you consider a normal farm practice? Generally, Natalie and I are more concerned around, you know, woodland removal and wetland removal. So if that's something you do as a normal farming practice, which I don't think it is, but if it is, then let us know and we can try to address that for sure. Yeah, it's a little bit difficult to know what a normal farming practice is these days. The only thing I can think about is like hedgerow removals. That's something that is commonly requested and commonly done, currently supported under our forest management bylaw, I believe. Yeah, there's just certain, you know, normal farming practices that we would like to get a little bit more info from you guys on. And yeah, that's the end of the list that I have here. So if anyone has any further questions, feel free to reach out.
Thanks, Natalie and Michael, for bringing this update forward. I think this is important. I don't want to shortchange the discussion on this, because I think there's lots of discussion that can be had. So if you would like to pose a question or a comment, please do that. So now, please. I see Simon, you're unmuted. Does that mean you've got a question? Okay.
I even tried to put up my hand, but I didn't do that right. So yeah, here we are. I heard you mention something about working with existing organizations like Ducks. Now, I got nothing against Ducks. We work with them and so on. But does that mean that if a developer, that he basically can give a cash donation to Ducks and is off the hook, or how does this all go?
Yeah, so it wouldn't necessarily just be providing them cash. They would have to come up with a formal offsetting plan, the developer and the developer's team. So they would have to, you know, address, you know, how much feature is being removed, how much feature needs to be replaced, usually at a greater compensation rate. We generally see that everything's replaced at a 2-to-1 compensation rate. That's a standard request. So they need to do a lot of work on the back end as well. It's not just necessarily, hey, Ducks, here's some money and you can do the work for us. It's getting that permission behind the fact too. So if they need permission from the Conservation Authority to do some offsetting work, then the developer is usually solely responsible for not only providing the cash, but getting the permissions from the different approval authorities, as well as coming up with their offsetting plan. And when they're done their offsetting plan, they would submit it to myself or Natalie, and we would review and make sure that it's okay and acceptable and makes sense, and it's actually providing, you know, at least no negative impact to the natural heritage features. But yeah, it would be better if there's some sort of enhancement as along with it as well. So everything that is being done is subject to review by the ecologist here in house, and we're looking forward to see some of these offsetting plans. We already get a few. That's kind of what triggered this in the first place, is ecological consultants will be saying in environmental studies, hey, you need to offset this feature if you're proposing to remove it. So currently the county doesn't have a policy, and we didn't really know how to require someone to actually reestablish features that they're removing. So there's a bit more behind it than just providing, you know, a cash and lose sum. They do have to do the work as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brenda?
Okay, I do have to leave probably right after I ask these questions, but in general, like what you're talking about, this idea of offsetting or not, I think in your in some of the documents received before this meeting, you had said that you would be doing some more consultation or whatnot. So I thought I would just want to point you to the province of Manitoba, where they have some pretty heavy wetlands conservation efforts underway. I say efforts because, you know, there's policy, but how much of it is actually happening is, of course, another thing. But there's this idea of no net loss, which I guess is what you're talking about with offsets. And I think that even with the list of, say, normal farm practices, I think there needs to be consultation there to maybe put together a bit of a list, but also to consider that even with normal farm practices, we can consider a bit of a no net loss. For example, drainage. Drainage can be done in a way that creates managed wetlands on the same property. As an example, it's not something that is required at all right now, but I think that if we could look forward to how agriculture can also serve sort of our green and gray plan in terms of climate change, that it would be good if we can start exploring those ideas now, because they would take a long time to implement, to convince, to communicate, or whatnot. So I just wanted to point out this whole idea of no net loss, which you guys are already sort of working with, but there are definitely some programs out there across Canada which are touching on this already to varying degrees of success. I think one of the biggest things that I hear about is that you can put these policies in place, but we also have to have teeth. So I just wanted to make sure that if we do come up with these policies, we also need to have the staff or the related consultants or whoever to make sure that whatever we are asking to happen does actually happen, and that people do get penalized if they don't follow through on those plans, because we actually do have quite a lot of conservation regulation right across this country. And one of the big things is that most of it actually is not enforced. So those are just a couple comments that I wanted to bring up. Thank you.
Any comment, Michael or Natalie?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Brenda. I definitely have been taking a look at some of, you know, offsetting projects that have been going on around the province, and there's definitely some good stories and definitely some bad stories as well. So we're trying to really aim for a good enforceable policy here that, you know, we won't have any bad news stories, I guess. But your point on, you know, a drainage being potentially turned into some sort of wetland features, we do frequently see that with stormwater management systems for larger proposals. They'll either turn their holding ponds into a wetland system, or they'll actually plant their entire design to create, you know, one type of wetland stormwater management system. So we have been seeing a lot of that, and they tend to work pretty well.
Any follow-up, Brenda? Thanks for your excellent questions. Scott, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to quickly weigh in on one of the expand on one of the answers that Michael gave with respect to offsetting and normal farm practices. Just to loop back to the early part of the presentation. Currently, if County Council were to see fit to adopt an offsetting policy, it would only apply to larger development applications and/or applications for clear cutting under the forest management bylaw, if the forest management bylaw is updated. So for those farming in gray, your day-to-day practices won't be affected. If you decided you were going to retire from farming and create a plan of subdivision, then you might have some offsetting requirements. Or if you decided you were going to propose to clear 50 acres and apply for a minor exemption or a clear cutting permit, then there might be offsetting, but day-to-day operations, we're not looking to get into a farmer's business in that regard. And I'll just put in a plug that later in the agenda, we have an update from Sarah Johnson on the updates to the county's forest management bylaw. So that ties in heavily to this topic as well. Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification, Scott. Paul, I think you had your hand up maybe, or is it down now?
That helped. That clarification helped. I was only going to say that if you want to get some input from farmers, that, you know, the winter time is the best time because you know, through Ag Services and that. But I think Scott explained that sort of the zero part of what this whole policy is about. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, stand in the food line at Grey Bruce Farmers Week and chat with the farmers and see what they have to say. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. I have been advised that we're looking for a motion here, and Grey County has a suggested motion on your agenda sheet. So if that motion it makes sense to you, if someone could please make that motion, please, as seen on your agenda. Basically, we receive it for information and that county staff consider any feedback that we've given.
I see Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you. A seconder, please.
And Councillor McQueen, I think I saw a hand. Councillor Hutchinson, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone opposed?
I just have a question, just before you go there.
Sorry?
Sorry, Madam Chair, it does say in there that staff consider any feedback received from the Agriculture Advisory Committee regarding this. Obviously, it's sort of new, it was sort of clarified from Scott. I still think though, through the Ag Services, I think is there an opportunity to get feedback on this as well through, through the commodity groups and that type of thing, or at least make them aware of it. I think that's something that hopefully that is captured in this motion, that there's still more opportunity to get feedback.
Yeah, definitely, Paul. We want all the feedback we can get for sure. We do have a bit of a survey that we sent out a few months ago, and I don't think they were included. So if you have anyone on the top of your mind, feel free to send it to us, and we can reach out.
The only reason I say it, farmers are busy. If you want feedback from, once it gets into the winter months, so maybe like January to March, there may be that opportunity, leading right up till, a week ago, people were taking the corn off or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's just, there's a good time coming up to get that feedback if
sure, yeah,
willing people. So that's all. Thank you.
Is an amendment to the initial motion required, or is it just assumed that it's in that content?
I think staff will take that note.
Okay, anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion is carried. Thank you very much for all that great discussion. Next is an Ag Summit update from Steve Furness. I had the pleasure of being at that summit, and take it away, Steve.
Thank you, Lori. You can hear me all right? So part of our economic development strategies, we're doing sector summits. We've completed manufacturing, small business, agriculture, and what's the other one? Anyway, so the ag one was held October 30th. And before I get started, just high level and respecting that we're under a bit of a time crunch, I want you to just mentally note if there's something that you think should have been raised, maybe raise it. This was a great discussion, but it was also a very small group. It was a very diverse group. We had different farmers, we had farm implement, we had representation from organizations, we had local food producers. So it was a good mix. But if I talk about the trends that were identified, opportunities and challenges, and you think of one, raise it, because we're still wanting all that feedback. So quickly, through the summit, direct marketing to consumers. So there was a trend during COVID where people were buying local, they weren't going to grocery stores. There was the desire to stay away. And so there was a uptake in the demand for local produce. And post-pandemic, that has declined and sales have declined. So there's a bit of a pullback, and whether that's higher food prices and people are more pinched, or whether they're going back to grocery stores. So there's a bit of a pullback in the market. There is strong support, and recognize that in Grey Bruce, there is local hubs and markets are well supported. And there needs to be, although there's more opportunity there to support that. So these are just high level. We get more detail, but they're high level. Land competition and consolidation. So we see a continued issue of rising land prices. The cost of land has gone up significantly. There's comments about competition from the Mennonite community and external buyers. It makes it difficult for farmers to expand, particularly if they're looking to see and attract new farmers or generational. And there is also the trend, the continued trend that's been happening, and this happens in other sectors as well, is economies of scale. So those are trends. I'd also say that rising land prices, from what I could see, is part of that is increased yields in our region, better genetics. Don't know if I would attribute that to climate change, but from what I've read, it's genetics. Financial pressures. So this leads into the next issue of interest rates and input costs are going up. Feed and fertilizers are going up, but the commodity prices have been strong over a number of years, although there might be a bit of a pullback in the coming years. So again, obviously finance is always important to all business owners, but they're particularly sensitive, I think, to interest rates and input costs. And of course, government policy, there was comments about government policy, and I think this is more at the federal, provincial level, need to help stabilize the market and support farmers financially. Operational challenges include labor shortages. Skilled labor in particular was a challenge and related to housing in the rural areas. And then succession planning, planning for generational changes, trying to get younger people who are involved in farming, and how do we do that to take over family farms? And I know there are some tax incentives, shouldn't call them incentives, but structures to help facilitate that. But I think the question or the point was more needs to be made. Regulatory and infrastructure issues. There is a concern about lack of local processing, food processing in our area. It requires our local producers to send their product further away, which increases transportation costs and reduce freshness. So there's a question of the regulatory burden and why there was frustration over the regulatory requirements that seem to be overly bureaucratic for smaller scale operations. Now, of course, food safety is always critical. No one's talking about reducing food safety, but if I paraphrase this right, and Laura, you correct me if I'm getting it, you were there. So, some of the food processing regulations seemed overly bureaucratic and not suitable to small scale, and the smaller scale operations are what we need. Community and social dynamics. The urban-rural divide, as we often hear, newcomers coming in and not really understanding that they've moved into a rural area. Obviously, conflicts over land use and expectations, minimum distance. We have seen loss of ag lands to tree planting, but it smells and share the road issues. So there is that, I think, continued education that has to happen. And then mental health was also raised. The stress of farming and social isolation is an issue when you combine that all together. So we have to be aware of the toll it takes on families and farmers. Opportunities and innovation. So one of the points was a direct to consumer sales on farm sales and direct sales to consumers. Obviously, if you can facilitate it, you get a better price. But how do we facilitate that, and how do we build more connections? I know in our discussion, we were commenting on some of our municipalities have their CIP program has incentives there that they weren't aware of. So that's something that we might want to work with the Ag Society or Grey Bruce Ag Service on trying to educate a bit more on what that's available. Education programs, need for education and training to help farmers adapt to new technologies. I know, Lori, I had a discussion yesterday with Georgian College, Henry Burdick, Amanda. She's talking to you. I think that's a great connection, in particular, talking about their intellectual property presentation that raise awareness. And, when you think about of all the sectors we deal with, I think the ag sector is probably the most entrepreneurial and may not even be aware that there's intellectual property processes that can be protected. So that's something that I think our local Henry Bernick Center that's now in Sydenham campus, Representative Amanda could help with. And I think the last point that was made is that working together, they can find solutions. And I really liked when I heard this comment that if you work together, you can get through some of these issues and address common challenges. So there's a willingness, and it was right across the board from the participants. So if I'll hopefully that was quick enough, Lori. And if we triggered anything and anyone wants to expand on it, or if we've missed the point, we're open and willing to just listen, because that's what the summits are about.
Thanks, Steve. That was
Thank
a
you.
great update. I feel like I'm a taskmaster here trying to push people, but I'm not
All right.
trying to do that. I think basically that's our sector trends and challenges agenda item pretty much summarized. Any questions or comments? Paul, you have your hand up.
Oops, sorry to capitalize because you're sort of talking my language, I guess, but thanks, Steve, for the update. Yeah, lots of changing trends, lots of things happening, and just want to briefly talk to the one part is the higher cost of farmland and the ability to maintain. I know a lot of family farms are traditionally what they're, but they're becoming more of a corporate types, and you're losing people. And I just think I spoke to Scott briefly one day there a few weeks back. I would like to entertain the idea of some kind of a policy. If, for example, if Mr. Jones is selling his farm and there's 2 kids and the high price of the land, the one child would like to buy the farm, but the other son or sister doesn't want to buy the farm, that son can't buy that farm because basically succession planning would say, okay, that farm goes to both of those kids. But, in saying that, maybe they would both like to stay in the community or still stay in the area, however, and raise their family continuing. So we do have the opportunity to sell surplus farm dwellings, so the farmer can stay in the farm or whatever, and the farm goes on to production and all that kind of stuff. I just think that there needs to start to be looking at a process that is our opportunity to create severances for the simple fact of keeping people in our community that still want to stay there, because the high price is driving people that have been in our community for years, and families been in our community. I went to a farm auction just a few weeks back, and it was a farm that was sold, and it's been in the family since the 1800s, and just because of circumstances and the high price, there's no continuation of somebody staying in that community. So I'll leave it at that. It's just something to ponder, but I think we're really into a challenging time that we really see a change in our community that's not going to be positive in our network or fiber of our community. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks,
Right.
Paul.
Okay.
Did anyone else have their hand up, or are we good? Okay. So thank you very much, Steve, for that update. I think that was
Thank you,
excellent.
Ron.
And we will move on to the forest management bylaw update. Scott Taylor or Sarah Johnson, who's going to do it?
Me. I'm just going
Thank
to
you,
share
Sarah.
my screen here.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Okay, hopefully, whoops. Can you see this now?
It's just, there we go.
That
Thank
worked.
you.
Okay, perfect. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to attend today and talk to you about our forest management bylaw. We are in the process right now of updating this bylaw. The bylaw itself is, it's been in place for over 20 years. And so we're starting to notice some deficiencies, as well as the topics that we've already talked about today. We need to come into alignment with some existing policy that we have in place, some policy that we are proposing, specifically as it relates to the climate change action plan, the county official plan, those offsetting policies that Michael and Natalie were talking about this morning. For everyone's benefit, though not knowing everybody's knowledge on the bylaw itself, I'm just going to do a brief overview. See if I can get my slides to work here. So the bylaw itself, obviously I mentioned it's been in existence for over 20 years, and it regulates tree harvesting and removal and promotes woodland preservation. This is what most forest management bylaws do, and as well as encouraging sustainable harvesting. So today I didn't want to go into any great detail of the bylaw as a whole. We wanted to highlight those things that are more applicable to agriculture. So right now, we are seeing an increase in minor exemption applications, which for those that do not know, a minor exemption is a clear cutting application. And most of those applications that we are seeing are related to agriculture, clearing for pasture purposes, for croplands, that sort of thing. So the bylaw, the current bylaw and the new bylaw aren't proposing to change the general scope. Obviously, it's still going to regulate tree harvesting and removal and promote preservation and sustainable harvesting. It's not going to change that there will be permits required to cut large quantities of trees. However, there's things that we are proposing to change, which I will highlight in a few minutes. The other thing that the bylaw does not require a permit for that as it relates to agriculture would be, and I think Michael touched a little bit on his presentation, fence row removal. That's not a there's no permit required for that. And then cutting of select trees for your own use. So things like firewood, if you're heating with firewood, or in some cases, fence posts, that sort of thing. One thing that I did want to clarify was that it is a forest management bylaw and it's not a tree bylaw. So there are a lot of municipal tree bylaws and other bylaws in place within Grey County that do not necessarily come into play here. A forest, we strictly deal with those larger woodlot areas with this bylaw, and that is not proposing to change with the update. So just briefly, the climate change action plan, which I believe Megan is on hand to talk about some things. I don't know if it's climate change today, the action plan today, but that's one of the big things that we want to come into alignment with, but also still allow that the harvesting practices within the county can occur, just more so aligning better with the policies that are there. So what are the big bylaw updates? So one of the big things is currently we allow for tree removal that is either done selectively or the clear cutting permit. And the selective the selective harvesting right now has two options. One is under good forestry and one is circumference limit. So circumference limit cutting is going in and targeting the best trees of the best size. And as you can imagine, that's not necessarily the best practice for the health and sustainability of a woodlot. So the new bylaw is proposing to remove that allowance for circumference limit cutting and just solely rely on good forestry. So good forestry targets all sizes of trees and targets those ones that may be bending in a direction that could harm another tree or maybe has a disease, so that overall the health and wellness of the woodlot once a harvest occurs is better. So the other thing, sorry, I'm trying to go fast because I know we're on a time crunch here. The other thing is minor exemptions. So that's the clear cutting permit. We're changing the name to special permits, or we're proposing to change. I guess these are all proposed changes right now because it's still in draft format. And within some of the changes for the minor exemptions in particular, there is a proposal that County Council may delegate someone as an approval authority so that it's not a report that comes to Council. So currently the process is when we receive these types of applications, they go through a process, it's circulated to neighbors and agencies, a report is drafted with a recommendation, and it's brought forward to County Council for decision. So it would remove that step should they decide that they wish to delegate that approval authority. The other thing that is happening with the minor exemptions is updating the complete application listing. Right now, because of the age of the bylaw and because of what we have noticed in trend and the change in policy, there's a lot of things that are being flagged at the review process that are required kind of outright and are very obvious now, but they're not clearly stipulated in the existing bylaw. So we're just looking to include those things when we know and make it very clear so that there's no surprises. And we don't have to obviously inform anybody after the fact that an application is incomplete and we need X study. So the other thing that is also really great about having a complete application listing is that if an application is incomplete, we can return it to the application and applicant and let them know what is required. Right now, we have a lot of applications that come in and they go through the process and then they sit on our desks until this study is completed. And sometimes if it's an EIS that's required, those studies can take upwards to a year. So then we have this open file. So it's nice and it makes it nice and neat and tidy and less administrative on our end and easy for an applicant to be very clear as to what's required of them. The other change is circulation timelines, updating to 15 business days instead of calendar days. And then the ability to add conditions, including replanting and rehabilitation, which has been a lot of EISs that we have seen that accompany these types of applications have been recommending this, but the actual bylaw itself is not clear that we can include those. So we are now proposing wording to allow for that. I believe I touched on good forestry stuff. The other updates are with stop work orders. We can now request rehabilitation and replanting, whereas again, it wasn't clear prior to this, and then the increase in penalties. So first conviction is not more than $50,000 or $5,000 per tree, where currently now in the current bylaw, it's I believe $10,000 and $5,000. So just kind of making it a little bit more dear for those people that are choosing to make those decisions should they be charged under the bylaw. And then basically where that leads us is obviously we need to update the bylaw, but we want to address a lot of things including the inefficiencies with regards to administration. We want to come into alignment with those new policies that have come into existence since the original bylaw, and just knowing the types of application and the increase in volume of these types of application that we are seeing. So we want to be able to reflect that or changes that will make those processes easier for the applicants. So what we're looking for from the committee is, what do you want to see in this new bylaw? What's working and what's not working? And have we missed anything? Now, I know this was a lot of information, and for you that may not be as familiar with this document, it might be challenging to answer any of those questions today, but certainly if you have any questions or any comments, I have included my email address at the end here, but certainly would welcome any questions or comments now if we have time.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was wonderful. Any questions or comments for Sarah now? Scott, please.
Sorry, just very briefly to the committee. As Sarah said, we're a little bit rushed today. This is sort of the start of the process. We are looking at going to council early in the new year with a report. And that report is not asking for approval. That's asking to move on to the next step, including consultation. So further to, I think, Councilor McQueen's comments earlier, winter happens to be a good time to consult with farmers. So we hope to be back out in the community sometime over the winter to get more detailed input.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other comments? No? Okay, I do feel like we're being rushed, and I thank you, Sarah, for being quick and speedy. If you think of anything, please email Sarah directly, because I think it's important that they get that she gets feedback from farmers. Talk to your fellow farmers, see if you can get feedback, and then get them to email Sarah so that she gets some feedback from us, because that's imperative. Okay, thank you so much. Moving on to beaver and coyote bylaw update. Is that Scott?
It's me again.
Oh, Sarah again. Okay.
Get to do a lot of talking today. So I'll just share my screen again. I will again try and make this brief. So let's just get. So basically, one of the other hats I get to wear here at the county is to help administer our nuisance beaver and coyote programs that are in existence. And why I am here today is because we've received some recent correspondence. Well, council received some recent correspondence from a local trapper, and he had indicated some concerns with the existing programs that are in place for nuisance beavers and coyotes. Specifically, the concern was that the compensation rate for both of the programs are insufficient. So if a trapper qualifies, currently reimbursement is $25 per beaver. And if they qualify for the coyote bounty, it is $50 per beaver. So council has requested that staff look into both of these programs as well as what our neighbors are doing. We thought it was very fitting that we have this discussion with the Agricultural Advisory Committee as well, because it's obviously directly related, specifically the coyote program, but the beaver compensation program is also very applicable in this. To not get into too much detail here, when I just want to kind of briefly overview the beaver and coyote process for those that aren't as familiar with it. So the beaver process, basically, if you identify or I guess to qualify for the bounty, if a landowner identifies an issue on their property, they hire a trapper. That trapper will then go in and trap however many beavers. They take those beaver tails, they don't need to take the whole beaver, to the municipal office, and there is someone at the office that verifies that, signs off on this form that they have filled out, and then that form is sent on to us for review, approval, and submit to finance for reimbursement. Coyote process is a little bit more labor intensive in that the qualifying claim has to have involved a livestock kill. So livestock has to be obviously there has to be a kill that has occurred, and it needs to be verified by a livestock evaluator. So the landowner identifies that the kill has occurred, call the livestock evaluator, they come out, they confirm that yes, this has indeed happened and it is because of a coyote. They sign off on a form, and then the landowner will hire a trapper or hunter. The trapper hunter does their job, brings this time the ears to the lower tier. Lower tier verifies, signs off, sends to us, and then we review, sign off, and send to finance for reimbursement for these individuals. Now, those are strictly related to that $25 and $50 bounty. That does not in any way prevent a trapper or hunter for charging their own fee for a service, but that is strictly related to those programs that we have in place. So just a little bit of background. The beaver bylaw has been around for a while, and it was introduced first introduced in 1983. Current compensation, as I mentioned, is $25 per beaver. The trapper, in order to qualify, must be a resident of Grey County. And then as part of my review, I have already spoken with a number of municipalities. So out of 12 municipalities, which also includes Grey, only 2 have nuisance beaver bylaws in place, and that is Grey and Bruce County. So I thought that was rather eye-opening when I just determined that. With regards to the coyote program, so it was introduced a little bit later. It was 1990. Current compensation is $50 per coyote. Again, the trapper has to be a resident of Grey County in order to qualify. And then out of those 12 municipalities, which includes Gray, only 4 have coyote programs in place. Gray and Dufferin both compensate 50, and Bruce and Huron have $100 per coyote. So that was interesting to see who had those and what their compensation rate was. So again, what we're looking for from the advisory committee was, do these programs work? Are they still applicable, and are they valuable to farming? You know, we can conclude what we think we know, but you guys are the experts, so we would love your feedback on that. Is there anything that we can do to improve the programs? And then the big question is the compensation sufficient? So I will leave it at that and open it up for questions. And again, my email's there if anybody wants to email me something after the fact.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Comments on what Sarah has presented or questions? Shirley, please.
Thank you, Lori. I'm just curious to know about the lower tiers within Gray. I know we have compensation here in Meaford, but I was just curious, do all the lower tiers have it? And if they do, then, you know, is the amount that we are offering same or different from the county? Is a trapper then going to go to the county with their coyote if it is a higher rate than what we were offering at the lower tier? So just wondered if there'd been any investigation into that.
So I haven't talked to our lower tiers. I actually was unaware. Meaford has a beaver bylaw or a coyote program.
A coyote program.
Okay. I'm going to reach out to your clerk. I did not know that. So I can't really answer that one. I did know. I'm going to actually reach out to the clerk and then I could probably more formally answer that question. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer right now.
Thank you, Shirley. Paul?
Yes, briefly. Yeah, I think one eyebrow raiser is it's been $50 since 1990. You can imagine even a cost of living what that would be, and I'll leave it at that. The one part about the trapper has to be in the same county. One is what qualifies a trapper. You know, I'll bet you look around and go, who's a trapper? And number two is why, like, it could be in a neighboring, you may be hard to source out. You may have to go beyond your border, especially if you're near a Gray Bruce or a Gray Dufferin, or who knows, right? So I just think there maybe needs to be a bit more flexibility on that. Certainly the landowner would be in Gray County for sure, but you know, I guess the question is what qualifies that individual to get that bounty. And because I think one of the questions, if you're an hour away from Owen Sound and you have a pickup truck, you may use more than $50 worth of gas, or you may use just $50 of gas just to get there to bring your paperwork. Obviously the paperwork's probably changed where you can probably do it online, which would save, other than you got to go to your local municipality. I'm going to have a little chuckle next time I'm talking to my staff to say who does the qualifiers on the tails or the ears. Thanks for that update, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it's usually someone in operations. I've always very clearly stipulated that I do not want those brought into my office. But just to your point, yeah, what we have heard is that the rate is too low. But that said, like we had mentioned, that doesn't stop the hunter or the trapper from charging for their service. I understand that there are some municipalities that do not pay for the service. They just believe that their compensation rate is sufficient. That is not the case with Gray County. I have confirmed with our roads department that when they do hire somebody, they pay for the service, and then should they qualify, they can apply for the bounty. And that is another comment that we have heard about, you know, why do they need to be in Gray County? I think historically it has to do with there are certain areas, and I am unfamiliar with all the hunting things, but there are certain sections, and so there's a reporting mechanism under your hunting or your trapping license, And so I think it has to do with that reporting. But it is a question and something that we will be looking into as part of this, because we are finding that the population of trappers within our area has decreased substantially.
Thanks, Sarah. And we can't move away from this topic without recognizing that the population of coyotes is increasing as well. And I hear from, especially in Chatsworth, that they're having beaver issues too. So it's important that I think that we continue to support this program. It's harder and harder for hunters to hunt the coyotes because the dynamics of the community has changed. Not everybody wants the farmers going through their block. So it's important we do everything we can to keep these guys at work. There's no groundhogs left in the countryside, it seems. So the coyotes have been busy there, and they're as busy as they can be to swipe the lambs, etc. So if we can do anything to support this program, that would be greatly appreciated. Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. I want to get, I'm just going to say, in terms of the next topic, Grey Ag Services Annual Report, we wrote an annual report. Emily pulled it together. It's in your package. If you have any questions, let me know. Okay, moving on. The report is fantastic, so do give it a good read. Experimental Acres update. We have Megan and Emily, hopefully, and I know you don't have much time, and I'm very sorry for that. I just want to check with Tara. Will we really lose quorum at 10:45? Please confirm.
Yes, I believe some participants have left, and there's another one that has another meeting abutting against this one.
So we have to have a hard stop at 10:45?
With the report that's being presented, I believe it is for information. So in respect of everyone's time, perhaps we could hear the presentation and carry on, but recognizing that there are no recommendations to come forward, and it's just a group discussion at this point.
Well, point of order, Madam Chair, I'll move the report from the Ag Services because I think does it need a motion, or is it just for information?
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I'll move that report.
Thank you. A seconder. I see Scott Mackey's hand up. Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Megan, please, or Emily. So they're going to present an Experimental Acres update, near and dear to Grey Ag's heart. So take it away, please.
Can everyone hear me and see the presentation there?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thanks for the opportunity to share about the 2024 Experimental Acres outcomes, as well as some of the findings from the specific projects. My name is Megan Miles. I'm the Climate Change Outreach and Engagement Coordinator, and I've been the Grey County staff lead on this program. And co-presenting with me today is Emily McKeag from Grey Ag Services, who is the program coordinator this year. So just a quick overview of the program. So it's a microgrant program for on-farm trials for practices that aim to improve soil health and carbon capture on farms. So this program delivers research results and knowledge sharing of best practices to support both environmental and economic sustainability of agriculture in Grey County. Farmers know their land best, so this program provides farmers with the flexibility to design their own projects and really helps de-risk the learning season of a new practice. As one farmer said, he'd been thinking about doing a project for a while, and Experimenters was the kick in the pants he needed to get going on the project. And then also having a consistent program framework across Grey, Dufferin, and Wellington allows for more regional collaboration, program awareness, and the ability to leverage learnings from across the broader region. So the program was designed to support regenerative farming principles, and this graphic shows what we mean by regenerative farming by showing the key principles, practices, and benefits. So those being minimizing mechanical disturbance through precision tilling or reduced tilling, keeping soil covered, such as with cover crops, increasing biodiversity through crop rotation and intercropping, maintaining living roots through perennials and retiring marginal land, integrating livestock through silvopasture, rotational grazing, and manure management. And this also shows the various benefits such as reducing flood risk and soil erosion, reducing fuel or input costs, improved pest management, and lower emissions. As another participant said this year, his main objective for his operation is to find the best use for his land and keep the soil on the land, which is why he was interested in the project, in the program. So over the course of the past 2 seasons, Experimental Acres has supported 12 on-farm trials, directly impacting practices on roughly 175 acres of farmland. We were really pleased this year with the quantity, quality, and diversity of applications. We received 18 in total, and the selection committee did a blind evaluation and selected projects based on trial design, replicability to other farms, its potential to reduce emissions, increase carbon capture, level of innovation, and alignment with regenerative principles. 7 projects were selected, which included 6 microgrants, and then a 7th project that we offered continued soil testing from a 2023 project, since often soil health results take more than one season to appear. This year, the test area ranged from 1.5 to 50 acres with a total test area of 114 acres. Also new this year, we did 3 video interviews with participating farmers to further raise awareness about the program and their projects. And between the videos and other social media posts, we had over 10,000 views and 350 interactions. We also hosted 2 knowledge sharing events. One was a farm tour in September, so participants can see other projects firsthand. For example, when we visited Peter's farm, we were able to watch as he opened up the fencing to let the cattle into the next section of standing corn as part of his strip grazing project, which was pretty exciting. Also in November, we hosted a joint networking event with program participants from Dufferin and Wellington to share about their projects. And it was really incredible to see how eager participants were to share about their projects and what they want to do differently next year and how interested they were in learning from each other. It was also really great to see the formal and informal connections and collaborations. For example, one of the program advisors from Dufferin, who's been planting cover crops since the 1970s, shared his knowledge with those who had done cover cropping trials. Another example, one Wellington participant, Heartwood Cidery, through the program, they connected with a fellow participant to source hot peppers for their special hot pepper cider. And new this year, by working with Gray Ag Services, we're able to have a much more detailed report that discusses the methodology and results from each farm trial, which is attached to this report. And I'll now turn it over to Emily to talk about that report.
Yeah, so like Megan said, we worked hard this year to put together this project outcomes report because a goal of our program was to facilitate communication of what actually went on in the projects and share the information so that other people can put it to use on their farm or maybe take the ideas and tweak it on something that they were already thinking about trying. So we did monitoring on all of the projects between May and September with farm visits, and we touched on some of the things listed here. And then just to note, we're looking at soil health changes through the program, but those are hard to see within one growing season. So some of the projects are things that can carry on and the testing can continue by the farmer in the future. And the first year was a great start to implementing the practice and to starting that soil health discussion and getting things going. So I'm going to go through and quickly tell you about each of the projects and some of the outcomes from them. So go ahead, Megan. So our first participant was Peter Kotzeff. He was looking at interseeding field corn. His goal for the project was to find a really simple, efficient, cost-effective way of seeding the cover crops into the corn that anybody could carry out. So it was really great to see that he was working on something that could be really translatable to other farmers. Because he was trying to use a broadcast seeder on an ATV to spread the cover crop seed, he needed to do it when the corn was at a much smaller growth stage. So he broadcast onto the 2 to 3 leaf stage instead of 4 to 6 leaf, which is normally recommended. He had really great establishment of his cover crops. He was really happy with that. And then a kind of neat aspect of his project in the fall, he actually turned cattle into the corn, standing corn, to strip graze it. And he did that until the corn was ready to be combined. And then he did combine and harvest the remainder of the fields. And then he turned the cattle out onto the stubble and also had them grazing what was there from the cover crops. So he had some added feed value from that. So a really great project overall. Our second participant was Devin Penny. You can go to his slide, Megan. So Devin was also doing interseeding into corn. He has an organic market garden though, so he was looking at sweet corn and a bit of a different system. Just to note again, we were really trying to make sure that we had clear communication of how the projects were designed and make sure that others could replicate them if they wanted to. So you can see a timeline that we put together for the projects at the bottom of the slide there. And those are included in that project outcomes report as well. So take a look at that. Devin was looking at crimson clover, soybeans, and fall rye as 3 cover crops that he compared in his sweet corn plot. And he had a whole bunch of different criteria that he ranked them on. So weed suppression, tillage reduction, several soil health parameters such as organic matter and nitrogen fixing, the ability to withstand foot traffic when he was harvesting sweet corn, the ability to stand up to mowing in the fall when he took down the corn but wanted the cover crop to continue living, whether or not the cover crop would overwinter and whether or not the cover crop would winter kill so that he had an easier spring work system the following year. Cool. So yeah, you can see how those all ranked out in our project outcomes report again. Our third project was Wade and Ann Deacon, which was Appenbrook Farms. They're a dairy operation in West Grey. They have liquid manure storage right next to the field where they produce a lot of their feed for the cattle for the year. So normally they would tank apply that liquid manure onto their haylage directly after first cut. Tank application is the standard practice, but it does cause a lot of compaction damage to the haylage crop for second and third cuts in that same year. So Wade wanted to experiment with hiring a custom operator to come and drag line apply the manure. And that way he reduced his compaction and he was really excited about the efficiency and the yield advantage that he saw from not having that compaction damage for his second and third cut. So he is planning on continuing with this practice in the future. Just to note, Wade, Devin, and Peter, all of 3 of our first projects here, also were the participants who helped us create the videos for Experimental Acres. And you can take a look. I think the YouTube links for those are also in our report. And you can see them talk about why they got involved in the program and what their outcomes were and their thoughts on all of this. Our fourth participant was Brenda Schrey. Brenda actually, her project was funded in the 2023 program season. The funding went into some perimeter fencing so that she was able to carry out her bale grazing project starting in November 2023 and then through the winter into spring 24. She was super excited. We were very grateful to be able to continue monitoring on her farm because again, these aren't usually changes that you can see within one growing season. And we were very excited to see actually really substantial increases in organic level matters. We saw that in a bale grazed area and a non-bale grazed area on the farm that were tested both in 23 and 24, but we saw a greater increase in the bale grazed area. So that was really cool. Our next project was with Amanda Deschambault. So she was looking at pasturing pigs and poultry, and she also had a component of her project which involved rotating the pigs through a pine plantation on the farm. So we did some infiltration and compaction monitoring on that, and we did see a little bit of increased compaction from the pigs where they had high traffic areas, like heading up to the water system. The poultry chicken tractor that you can see there, every time that she moved it, we saw really good, dense, even manure matting from it and great regrowth on those sections of the pasture that had good nutrient put down. Our sixth project was Jennifer Osborne from All Sorts Acres. Jennifer was using waste wool from local sheep producers to create pellets, which are used as a soil amendment. Mostly her product has gone into houseplants or gardens, and she wanted to look at the application of it in a field setting. So she created the plots that you can see on the bottom corner there of the slide, and she had a control area and varying rates of pellet application. We looked at nitrate testing monthly with it and infiltration testing for to try and see the water holding capacity. It was pretty difficult to measure. We had some pretty major rain events around the time that we were doing soil testing, and I think that in fact affected our nitrate level results. But hopefully she could see more if she continues the project in the future. And then our last project was Don Swindell. He had a super neat project. He has a very low wet area on his property. He was trying to reduce erosion and field runoff, so he was putting in forages. He did them in a cross-seeding pattern, which was supposed to slow water movement down across the field and increase field cover when he was using a seed drill for planting them. And it was so successful that he did plant all of his winter wheat this fall in a cross-seeding pattern again. And he's actually hoping to get better weed suppression, increase his population count, and not have crowding in the rows for next summer from that. So lots of great results.
So in terms of our next steps, we're looking forward to sharing the findings of this year's Experimental Acres program at Grey Bruce Farmers Week. And subject to council approval, we'll also be promoting applications at Farmers Week and continue to work with Grey Ag Services for 2025 program delivery. We'll continue to collaborate with Grey Ag and other farm organizations to promote the program and share learnings. Also, we're looking to provide some additional support in helping applicants develop an effective farm trial that really answers the questions that they're looking to answer on their farm. And we're doing that through Grey Ag's winter course offerings. You'll see a couple of the courses that are relevant and related to Experimental Acres on this agenda. And as you might have noticed in the project outcomes report, one program limitation is that it often takes more than 1 year for these soil health results to appear. So we're also looking at opportunities for multi-year testing as a way to more accurately evaluate trials. And this would also help us maintain and build and support this community of really innovative producers in Grey County. And in the interest of time, we did have a 3-minute video to share, but I've just put a link in the chat to our Experimental Acres playlist where you can see all the videos that we've created. And then if you go, there's kind of one wrap-up video that we look forward to sharing at Farmers Week that's kind of a summary of the program. And with that, just thanks again to Grey Ag Services for helping us coordinate the program this year. It was a really great partnership, and also thanks to Wellington and Dufferin for their ongoing knowledge sharing and collaboration. And we're happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Megan and Emily. The program was fantastic. I think it was cool to see the farmers networking together and talking about their projects and getting ideas from each other. So well done to you both. I think it was an excellent program. Any questions or comments for Megan and Emily, please? I'm not seeing any. In the interest of time, I guess. Thank you for rushing that, Megan and Emily. I know it's not easy, so thank you for doing that. Tara, just a question in terms of process. We were to have a motion here. Where are we at?
Yes, and just prior to when we still had quorum, the motion was moved by Councillor McQueen and seconded by Councillor Mackey and voted on. So we're okay to proceed.
Sorry, I thought that he had said the Grey Ag report there, so I apologize for the confusion. Okay, in the essence of time, perhaps in the roundtable discussion, we'll just quickly, is anyone dying to say something that needs to be said? I know that Keith wanted me to mention to everyone that there's a delegation going to county council meeting to counter the karst well issue that was raised to council a few meetings back. So that's coming up. So that's to be aware of. Any other things that we should be just quickly mentioning it at this moment? I see Tom's hand up, please.
Well, morning, everyone. Real quick, I've working with the a guy that I do some in my personal business life, but he is into collecting bale wrap. He's going to be expanding quite large. That'll be directly to the growers, like, or the ag sector, as well as our landfills. But I'll be collecting some more information, and I'll be sharing that, and hopefully we can get him in as a delegation in the future. But certainly we have a home for that stuff now, instead of filling landfills and not knowing what to do. So very anxious to hear what he's got to bring to us. Thank you.
That's perfect, Tom. And if you could send that information to Gray Ag, that would be greatly appreciated, because we can help you get the word out once you're ready to roll.
Thank you.
Because that's definitely a huge issue for all of our farmers, so that's important. Great. Anything else? Okay, so sorry? No. Correspondence, I don't think there was any. In terms of other business, Tara allowed us to add our winter course roster and our Grey Bruce Farmers Week brochure to the agenda, or the meeting items. Canada Post strike is not at a great time for us right now, so we are not able to get the word out about all these things. We have 11,000 brochures waiting to go out in the mail next Tuesday, and that's not going to happen. So if you can spread the word about our winter course roster as much as you can, and Grey Bruce Farmers Week, I'll quickly say, fun facts, it's 1 week later this year. It goes from the 8th to the 14th, and Ecological Day and Crops Day are swapped. So Crops Day is Monday and Ecological Day is Tuesday. So share the word on that. We're live streaming, we're in person. There's 57 speaker voices. There's pre-recorded on-demand features. You can access all the information for 30 days following the event. We have over 80 sponsors. We have 50 exhibitors that are solely exhibiting, plus all of our sponsors are exhibiting. So it's an amazing program. So please try to attend. Also, there's a Grey Soil and Crop meeting happening on Wednesday, December 18th at the Durham Legion. If you want to attend that, please email our office. Okay, next meeting date is March 5th, 2025. I hope we have quorum. And any other comments before we ask for a motion to adjourn?
Because, Lori, you've moved Farmers Week a week later, that guarantees that the first week of January is going to be beautiful weather.
And we're going to get the storm.
Exactly.
Exactly. I'm hoping that all this snow gets out of the system and it'll be lovely weather for Grey Bruce farmers.
I like your optimism.
Yeah. Motion to adjourn. Tom? Lots of people, but I think I saw Tom's hand up first. Thank you very much for taking the time today. Thank you for your patience as we rushed through things. And if you haven't had a chance to look at all the meeting items, please look there. And if you have any questions, call or email Gray Ag and we'll try and find you an answer. Thank you, everyone. Merry
Fabulous
Christmas.
job, Lori. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Take care.